welcome everyone to our 2021 budget.
Guys, speak up that.
Hello?
The end of the mic.
I'd
I'd like to welcome everybody to our 2021 to 24 budget presentation for public. And with that, I will turn it over to Christopher Nelson.
Thank you, Reeve Clark. So I'm just going to give a little of housekeeping directions first off. With that being said, I will be presenting each department and I'll take questions from each department after that time, just so that way if questions are from either council or from the public, we can get those questions identified. I think we should probably do an introduction since we do have participants also on the line. So I'm Christopher Nelson, Director of Corporate Services with the county.
Andrew Rishick, Director of Municipal Services.
Larry Clark, Reeve.
Cassidy, CEO.
Ernie Gender.
Three Needs, Erskine, Buffalo Lake.
Dave Grower, Big Valley.
Wayne Nixon, Denelda, Red Willow.
Les Stolberg, by Morandiang.
James Nyberg, Erskine South Warden Councilor.
Rick Reed, Director of Operations. Just turn it off.
Perfect. So the budget that you're seeing before everyone today is the budget for the 2021-2024 budget cycle. We're required to do a budget of 4 years for operational and 6 years for capital. With that being said, in 2020, we faced some significant challenges with COVID. Before we finished the 2020 revised budget, we ended up having to go back and make some significant changes to the 2020 budget. With the economic downturn, council came forth and came up with a 0% tax increase, as well as some cuts to some of the budget lines that we could see that could take some cuts to better reflect the times that we are facing. So the 2021 budget started in the spring of 2020, and it has been a long process, making adjustments, getting everything. So our departments have worked hard to provide the same level of service that we've grown to, accustomed to. We worked with some reduced staff and had some budget constraints, which provided challenging to complete all the programs effectively. So one of those challenges that we did face was our roadside mowing, and we identified that a lot of there was some equipment failures. And in this budget, we have identified and are working to rectify that with the purchase of some new mowers, as well as trying to ensure that we have appropriate staffing levels to complete all of the jobs we need to do. We want to continue to build on our strengths and capitalize opportunities such as securing bridge funding, getting stimulus funding that helped us complete some of our projects last year. We're also going to continue to work on securing more long-term gravel supplies. In 2020, we did secure another long-term gravel supply, and in 21, we're hoping to finalize another deal that we've been working on. And one of the other challenges we've also faced for the 2020-21 budget cycles is additional programs and costs that were formerly at a provincial level have now come down to a municipal level. And some of those programs that have existed that have caused us some challenges include policing, as well as ASB downloading, such as the closure of the provincial ag office. So some of those things have provided challenges to us at the county. So the next slide is how our budget is allocated. So what you see before you is how your tax dollar is spent. So we can see that we have public works, 48% of the budget, administration, corporate services, municipal services at 13%, fire at 8%, utilities at 6%, just about 7%, policing and emergency management at 5%, recreation and culture, and our culture includes museum and libraries at 4%, ag services at 4%, planning and development at 3%, garbage and recycling at 3%, council at 2.5%, and any of our others, which includes our FCSS, cemeteries, airports, small funding items that I'll kind of capture in there. So that's how our tax dollars spent for the 2021 budget. Next slide. So our sources of funding, so there's only a couple of ways that a municipality can. So there's only a couple of ways that we can secure funding for the county. So the majority of our funding comes from taxes at 66% of our revenue. Grants equals another approximately 24%. User fees, which are user fees, include anything user paid, such as utilities, equipment rentals, private land spraying, land title searches, any of those services that we get called on is about 9%. And any of the other things that are just small little items is about 1% of our budget. Do I have any questions at this time? Yes.
The funding from the grants, we have a low, okay, we were lowered by 25%. Is that included in this year's budget and within that percentage group there?
Yes. Yes. So we do have a downturn in some of our grant funding that we received, and I will be identifying that throughout the budget presentation.
Thanks, Krista.
You're welcome. Any further questions? Good. All right. So if anybody is following along with the document, I'm not going to go through every single number that's presented, that number there. I'm going to be doing everything at a higher level overview as to what the budget is, any of the major projects that are in the department. And so I will be following the narrative by the departments, how it's listed there. So our first section is our general tax and requisitions. And we are seeing a decrease from the prior year of 2.4%. Now, ratepayers will be seeing an increase due to the new policing requisition that was introduced in 2020. In 20, it was $145,000, and in 2021, it's going up to $218,000. With that being said, we are going to see an increase for an additional 2 years to 3 years. I believe it's 2024 is what we've been forecasted through to. And then from there, we don't know where the policing model is going to go.
On the requisitions, I believe it was Lacombe that was saying that we could not rate it up as a requisition. Is it in, are we writing it up as a requisition now?
We, if I may, sorry, we had our tax rate bylaw drafted in a way that we could single it out and treat it like it was a requisition, even though it is technically still part of the municipal tax rate.
Thank you.
So right now, based on our projected assessments that we have going forward, we're projecting a decrease in our linear and M&E taxes, which is our machinery and equipment taxes. And we're predicting, based on assessments, an increase in our farmland and our residential taxes based on where our assessments are going. Now, our assessment numbers aren't finalized until later on, usually March and April, we get the finalized assessment numbers. And so we will be coming back with a revised budget, as we always do, that will finalize what tax rates we'll be charging in May of 2021 and any changes that we may be seeing. So this is the budget that we're putting forward today as our budget for 2021, but we will still have a revised budget in May. Is there any questions about taxes?
I've been asked this one a few times. Will there be an increase in any of the taxes, or is it zero, or what are you doing? Asked by my ratepayers. I don't know.
So right now, based on the assessment values, they will see an increase, as well as policing. You would see an increase in your taxes, but that's based on those assessment numbers. And so those are numbers that are outside of our control. Any further questions? So I'm going to move into our biggest department, Public Works. So Public Works is seeing a 16% increase from last year for taxes, for what they're going to require in their budget. And I know that seems like a really scary number, that we have a 16% increase. What are we doing there? But the majority of that can be seen from the fact that we are losing some of our grant revenue. So our Municipal Sustainable Initiative Grant, or MSI grant, is projected for 2021 to have approximately a $1 million loss in revenue for us. So that loss of revenue does hurt the County of Stettler, and we've really tried to tighten up anywhere we can for costs that are associated. So that is one of the things that we are identifying, that we are seeing an MSI cut. We are also seeing it with our operations as well as our capital. So that's our capital MSI grant in Public Works. With the COVID restrictions that were in place, our seasonal staff hires were extremely limited in 2020. This did provide some challenges to being efficient and effective in getting all of our jobs done. The staff worked fantastic. Everybody stepped up to the plate. There was cross-training that was done and sharing of staff between departments. It worked great, but there was some stuff that we did identify as inefficiencies. So this budget is presented with having the staffing levels back to what we had pre-COVID and making sure we're able to complete the programs that we need to do. We're also looking at moving to 1.5-inch gravel for the gravel program to stabilize soft road structures. So what that will mean is typically we've put on 3/4-inch gravel, and we'll be looking at 1.5-inch gravel to put on. Some of the projects that we have that will be taking place in the 2021 year include some road restructurings with the Fenn Road, that's part of some grant money, as well as some Gatsby transitional grant projects. And the Gatsby transitional projects are a priority. A lot of that's grant funded from the dissolution, as well as finalizing the BOTHA dissolution. And so that money does need to be spent in those areas, and the work does need to be completed. We were successful in 2020 getting bridge funding as part of stimulus funding. And so a lot of that bridge work has been completed, but we still have some bridge work to do. We completed 6 bridge replacements in 2020, and just for reference, there's 73 bridges in the county. And some of the capital that we have that we've scaled back as well, but the capital that we have in this budget replacement is 2 graders, 1 fleet truck, and two roadside mowers. Does anybody have questions on Public Works? Yes, Ernie?
On the fleet truck, are you calling it like the tandem gravel truck or something like that?
No, the fleet truck that we have there, and actually just as you said that, I just realized that I missed one thing in that. That should also have that, there should have been a puppet trailer, correct? If I'm wrong, right? So I did miss putting that in there, my apologies. So the fleet truck is a regular 3/4 ton truck, half ton.
That's what I thought, that we were
Yeah.
gonna have a truck and pump.
Yeah, that was completely missed in my, when I said capital replacement. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Krista, I thought that MSI granting was cut 638,000 instead of $1 million.
So the net revenue based on everything that I've got calculated is closer to the $1 million mark.
That would show up when MSI was already going to decrease from 20 to 21. And then we took the reduced level in 21 and decreased it again by 25% based on the advice that we received. So it would be higher. So 601,000 from the capital, then the 25% from the operation, which is about 200, say 250. And then just the overall increase as we go through the MSI program from 20 to 21.
Thank you.
Are there other questions on Public Works at this time? I'm going to roll into recreation and culture. So recreation and culture is also seeing some decreases from the prior year. In recreation, we're seeing a 1% decrease. And in our cultural, which is our libraries and museums, is seeing a 5% decrease. We're still planning on operating the same programs within our recreation, but the one thing is that we are looking at options for virtual events to see what we can do. Now, the reason we're seeing a decrease in these functions is because we also felt the MSI operations getting cut here. So what we would normally give to community assistance, library and museum fundings are being reflected in this budget with cuts based on what the budget has presented with the projected MSI cuts. Now, in the event that we do hear some changes that come through, we do know that we will look at what levels we can reinstate those groups back to. And the same goes for Public Works. We do have projects that we know that we cut right now out of our Public Works budget with the MSI funding. That would be, if MSI funding is there, we'll be adding those back in. And that's something that we are hoping you'll see on our revised budget, depending on where they come in at. Is there questions on recreation or culture?
If you could just clarify, in case I get asked this question, is 1% for recreation and 5% for culture? And why is that? Is it the 1% because the whole recreation piece wasn't funded with MSI?
So what you have to keep in mind here is I know sometimes, and you'll see a 1% in one department, and then you're like, that's such a huge number versus a 1% to a large department. And we're talking some smaller numbers. So for instance, like right here, yes, that's net.
Yeah, when we talk about net expense, when we talk about the decreases and increases per department, we're talking about the net expense. So for example, in recreation, where we saw a MSI cut, we also directly reflected that as a cut to expenses going up. So that would be a 0% increase or decrease. The 1% is just operational cuts, which is fairly insignificant.
So in recreation, we're seeing basically a decrease in the total budget. So from 2020, recreation is going from 518,000 to 509,000, 510,000. So we're talking about $8,000 of cuts in recreation. In culture and library, so library museum, it's going from 136,000 to 129,000, so approximately $7,000. So we're talking smaller dollar values, so the percentages can look quite skewed sometimes with the differences in there. Is there further questions on that? Going to planning and development. So planning and development is seeing a 1% decrease from the prior year. And some of the projects that you're going to see in the 2021 budget include urban style addressing system in Gadsby, the intermunicipal development plan, the IDP review with the town of Stettler, review of the Southeast Stettler major area structure plan, Buffalo Lake South Shore statutory planning, and working on the merger of the Gadsby and County land use bylaws. And in 2021, we are looking at replacing and getting new aerial photography. And this is coming out of one of our reserve funds. So the reserve was there, we could use it for aerial funding, and this is what we are presenting to have for consideration for 2021. Is there any questions on planning and development? I'm going to go into, it's all good. So we'll just go into the next department, which is our regional fire. And our regional fire department is seeing a 9% increase from the prior year. There's continued focus on recruitment and retention. And in 2021, there's going to be a level of service to ratepayers throughout the county of Stettler and fire agreements review done. So we're going to be doing reviews, and that's upcoming that council's aware of. Now, part of the big increase for regional fire is over the last 3 years, and this is the 4th year of it, the fire department has been funding their two-way radio replacement. So this is the year that we're looking at getting that replacement put in, as well as a drill tower at the Stettler station for training purposes. And looking ahead, the fire department has identified this, that as opposed to having big purchases, they're trying to figure out a way to increase the reserve transfers to save for future capital replacements. So spreading those capital purchases out over multiple years. We have had success in other departments doing that, and slowly it seems to be catching on with some of the other departments. And this is something that I will address also later on in the budget, but we're looking for council guidance and ratepayer buy-in as well, to ensure that we are putting away the appropriate amount of capital for future capital replacements as well as projects. Is there questions on fire?
Krista, just for clarification, the reason for the replacement of the radios is to be on the same system as what it's to go on the same system as the RCMP and the.
Right, the HVAC system and with the dispatch that apparently went down for the hours. So that they're all communicating the same.
Just for clarity to people. What it is.
Yeah, which will theoretically reduce our operating costs moving forward. Currently, we have to maintain all of our own towers, tower repeaters, and licenses for our radios, whereas through AFRAX, that's provided by the province. We just have to have the actual end radios in trucks and on bodies.
Okay, thank you.
And will that save us money then, since we don't have to take care of those towers?
Right, yeah.
Is there any other questions? So I'm going to move now into protective services and emergency management. So protective services has seen a 6% increase in their budget from last year to this year. The policing requisition that I spoke of earlier, we reflect what we have to pay to the provincial government for policing services in this budget line. We used to have in the protective services budget the resource officer, and our understanding is that resource officer is paid within this police requisition or policing model now. And so we still felt that having it in this budget was more appropriately reflected so people could see what the cost was going to be. Annually, protective services is one of our departments that was probably one of our first departments. I think it was the first department that really identified the need to plan for capital replacements. And so they've been putting away money annually for replacements, so there's never a big surge or increase in having to purchase. And it's been working really well with their department to replace their patrol units or any other capital they may have. Our emergency management department saw a decrease of 9.5%. And this department probably faced the biggest challenge of the year last year when we had to implement our EOC, our Emergency Operations Center. Now, with the Emergency Operations Center, all of us staff that work at it are expected to be trained to a certain level. And so we started planning for training of this back 2 years ago, and some staff have been successful in getting the training, and other staff still need to. So we've been putting money in the budget. These haven't been able to be done because there hasn't been instructors or there hasn't been the classes to the level that we need emergency training at. So we do still have staff that need to get the training completed. And so we do have a reserve transfer from the prior years to get this staff trained, and this is a requirement that we do have to have the staff trained. Continued projects that will be happening with protective services include Coffee with a Cop, joint operations with provincial and federal partners, and the implementation of the e-ticketing system that's a requirement in 2021. Is there any questions on those departments? I'm going to go into agricultural services now.
Sorry, Krista.
Yeah.
People might want to know what your e-ticket is.
So I can answer that. E-ticketing is where it's more on the back end than the front end, so it doesn't make much of a difference to you getting a ticket, except that the ticket is a printed ticket rather than a handwritten ticket. But basically what it means is when a ticket is issued by our guys, it goes into the court, the provincial court system immediately from their stations out and about. Don't really have a choice on this. There's some definite capital, not capital expenses, but startup costs associated with it, but we were able to cover a lot of that off over an extended period. So some of the equipment was bought last year, some of it will be bought this year. But it does represent a fairly significant change. We have the printers and the cars and stuff now, which we didn't need before.
I mean, we've gone to an e-invoicing system, I don't know exactly what you call it, in Stettler Ambulance, and it's been working really effectively for us.
Is there other questions on emergency services or protective services? Perfect. So I'm going to roll into agricultural services. So agricultural services is seeing a 26% increase from the prior year on our budget line. And this one is going from a $537,000 budget line to $686,000. It's a $149,000 variance. With COVID last year, seasonal staff hires were eliminated in 2020, and we reduced some of our agricultural programs. That being said, we did utilize staff between departments, and what this is a better reflection of making sure that staff that was working for agricultural services, still doing jobs, most of them were put in other departments, and this is now making sure that it's reflected in the appropriate operations. It's just loose.
We shut it off too.
There, it's back. So making sure that it's in the correct departments. In 2021, we're exploring options and considering virtual workshops and events. Annually, Agricultural Services has also gotten on the board of making sure that we're putting away reserves for capital expenditures. So they've also got a line that identifies replacement of capital. In 2021, the capital for consideration is a flat deck trailer for Agricultural Services. And I think that the only that I haven't said there is this budget does reflect a reduction in support to the Battle River Research Group as well as the seed cleaning plant. So those things have been identified also in the budget. Yes?
Oh, yeah, that's the two I sat on as a board member. So it increased 26% and you cut the funding to Battle River and to the seed plant in half?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I
in
just wanted to
total,
make sure.
the Battle River Research and seed cleaning, it's about a $6,500 cut between those two programs of
Yeah.
funding.
Ah. Okay, thank you.
This program, the agriculture services, are they still looking after most of the mowing at the lake and stuff, or has that been put under public works?
Most of that is under Public Works, correct? Yes. Is there further questions on agricultural services?
I have one. Some of the Ag Service Board people are working for Public Works, so that's been allotted over and charged to the Public Works and put in their budget.
In 2021, we have that. So in 2020, we had them stay in the Public Works budget, the majority of them. If they were earmarked for that, it becomes a bit of a balancing nightmare. It's no different than, and I'm going to pick on our information technology, our IT department. Our IT department goal goes underneath one department, and we keep them in there. But today he was working in council, and tomorrow he might be working in Public Works, and then the next day in admin. But we keep them all underneath one department just for the ease of trying to track where that employee completely goes. So if they're under one department, we keep them under one department. And even though we shared a lot of our staff between departments in operations last year, we still kept them underneath the Public Works budget.
Krista, if you went back to the 2019 budget, there likely wouldn't be that much of an increase then.
No, no.
Maybe even decrease.
I would have to pull it, but yeah, we'll probably be there.
It would be similar.
Very similar.
Yeah, 2020 was a
Yeah.
weird year all around.
Can we forget about it altogether?
Never forget.
history. Doomed to repeat it if you do,
No, thanks.
and I don't want to do that.
So I'm gonna roll into the utilities department. So our utilities is our water and our sewer departments. And our our water department is seeing a 3% increase from the prior year and a 0.5% increase in the sewer for the year for our budget lines. Some of the ongoing projects include flushing of all lines, checking valves, meter changeovers in the village or the hamlet of Gadsby, replacing old meters that are up from warranty, replacing and installing curb stops for emergency water shutoff, investigating groundwater intrusion and odor control at Buffalo View Estates. We're also looking at doing some installation of some cement pads at the Red Willow Truck Fill and Lagoons, and those are some projects that are being carried forward from the 2020 year that were not able to be completed. The capital for consideration is expansion of rural water lines, and we do have some water lines that weren't able to be completed in the 2020 year, so they are getting carried forward into 2021, as well as some replacement of water lines in the Weimar area. And you're going to see replacements of water lines and rural water line expansions over the next couple of years, as these have been earmarked for them to be completed. Yes, Dave?
But just so everybody's clear, it's not the rural water lines around Weimar that's being replaced, it's the old ones that are in the town, or in the hamlet.
Yes, that's my understanding.
Just so everybody, if somebody's listening, they get that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No further questions on that? So I'm going to roll into administration. So administration saw a 4% decrease from the prior year. Now, if you're looking at the budget line, you'll actually see a significantly higher decrease than that. In 2020, when COVID hit, everything was going down. We knew that we were going to be facing some further economic downturns with oil and gas. We decided to set up a rather large allowance for doubtful for the 2020 year of $2 million. The numbers aren't quite finalized yet in the 2020 year end, but we didn't have to do a big allowance for doubtful accounts for 2021. So that's where you'll see a big difference between the administration from 20 to 21. In 20, we completed the digitization of land files, and we're going to be continuing with digitization of all of our county records to ensure that we do have an adequate backup and ability to access our records that we need. We're further integrating Botha and Gadsby land files into our records. In 21, we do have a major financial software upgrade that we need to do to our accounting software. This is a mandatory requirement that we just have to do an update for. We also have an increase in administration for election expenses for the October 18th, 2021 municipal election that is upcoming. We're continuing to explore the sale of unused county lands that exist within the hamlet, as well as the old public works yard. And some of the capital that's for consideration is generator for facilities, and that's going to be part of a grant funding that we have. So that is what is in the administration budget. Do I have questions on it? Yes, Dave?
Yes, but part of the decrease would be that when this COVID thing came here, there's people that took their time off, or they were not working here, so that would have an effect on the decrease, yeah?
Not necessarily, because we didn't actually have too many, and this is just for administration. Mm-hmm. So in administration, there was a couple of staff that had looked at it, so we actually had to bring them back in 21 or in 2020. So you'll still see that everything kind of stayed relatively status quo with wages. There wasn't a whole lot of changes between budgets. So the budget that you do see is the budget we're going to be bringing to council next week to be passed. We will be bringing in May of '21 the revised budget with the final assessment numbers from the province and the school numbers as well. This presentation also includes the 6-year capital, which allows council to see what projects are upcoming for capital replacement and that we're aware of. So this is also in the budget package. I haven't gone into much detail in regards to it. Keep in mind that even though we are looking at a 4 and a 6-year operations and capital budgets, is that we are only required to balance the budget of the 2021 year. So it's only the current year we're working at. The other years are for planning purposes that we can see looking forward what type of costs we are going to have. So at the end of the day, I'm presenting a balanced 2020 budget. And after we deal with all of the cash flow and all of the reserves and any of those transfers to take place, I'm showing a surplus of $797 for the 2020 year, and it is a balanced budget. And at this time, I'm open to any questions that may come. Thank you. Do we have any questions from the public, Andrew?
Yeah, we've got a few people on the actual Zoom call. If you guys had any questions and wish to ask them, you could certainly unmute yourself and ask those questions now. Not seeing anyone waving or unmuting themselves, so let me conclude our presentation.
Okay, well, if it does conclude our presentation, I'd like to thank Yvette, Andrew, Rick, Kristen, staff for all the work put in place to work through this budget and bring this presentation forward for public and for council, and for the council for the time that's been put in to come up with this budget. So thanks everybody for participating. And if there is no further questions, that would be...
Mr. Chairman, I would just, for the public out there, if they are interested, to reach out to any of the councillors with any thoughts or advice they have, would be appreciated as well. We do stand here as 7 individuals to make these decisions that have been suggested to us by our administration, and I thank them for that. But any advice or thoughts that are out there from the public, I would myself personally be open to hear that and open for discussions.
Thanks, Councillor Nyberg. That's, as we have this open meeting today, that's part of that piece of that also too. So thank you for bringing that up.
Well, I have one more question over there.
Go back to the slide of the amortization. I'm just kind of wondering, okay, why is it consistent for so many years?
Oh, the cash flow that it was showing.
So, why you're seeing the amortization like that as the same across the board is, the biggest thing is that we have to identify is that we're depreciating our assets. They tend to stay, depreciation stays the same unless we're purchasing a lot of new assets or disposing of assets. It still stays on that relative same level. So what you'll see is at the end of, or when I come with the revised budget, I'll be pulling in an additional, I'll look at those numbers and see if they need to change. But because it's an expense on the budget, and then we have to take it out to get the cash flow, we tend to keep it consistent throughout the years because it isn't in and out. It isn't an actual cash outlay.
Okay, so you're just trying to keep that more, that's kind of the last one that you will balance a budget within.
Yeah. So our amortization, depreciation, whichever word you want to use there, is they do stay the same in my presentation, in my budget, but they are just, if you will, a placeholder of an approximation of what the amortization would be on an annual basis.
Thank you, Kristen.
You're welcome. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
The federal, at least they could put a budget together. They haven't done one for 19 months, so.
Krista, you could start with the feds and then work your way.
Oh, no, no.